You are listening to The Central Cast, a podcast for mystics and misfits just like you, recorded every week in Pasadena, California, before a live audience. Thanks for tuning in.
So my t-shirt is not a lie. I am a queer woman and a pastor. And I want to just talk this morning a little bit about sort of what it means for queer folks, and I'm drawing on my own experience here greatly, to be Christian, evangelical, and then to realize that you are queer and kind of what psychologically that does to a lot of us. And I want to start by saying that one of my essential beliefs in life, which I've developed over time, is that each of us has a God-given self. You might call it your authentic self or, your essential self. And I love this quote from Quaker writer Parker Palmer, who says that the purpose of life is to fulfill that original self given to us at birth by God. But before we can live out who we are, we have to be able to accept, value, love, and reveal who we are, that original self. We have to feel like we're allowed to accept and reveal that self. And this is where one of the problems comes in with Christianity, because in the Christian tradition, our value is dependent on God. It is a reflection of God. We have to have an image of a God who would make us as we are and call it good. We have to be able to look in the mirror, to look at our own reflection and see in our image a reflection of God, a part of God that was put into us. When we don't have an image of a God who loves us and calls us good, I believe everything falls apart. No good can come from that. We become separated in that moment from our true selves and from God. We doubt very seriously that this judgmental, punishing God, this disciplinarian who many of us grew up with, we doubt that God can possibly accept us as we are. And so, in that realization, we set out to repress and reform our essential selves. And I think that it may be that everything that goes wrong in the world begins with that moment, begins with the moment that people set out to become acceptable instead of just accepting who they are. I really do wonder if, the root of every injustice, every meanness, every trauma is some version of that moment where we separate from our God-given self and repress who we are and decide to warp ourselves into some mold. This is how shame enters the world. And it is truly an awful thing to witness someone who is ashamed of themselves. Those vulnerable moments of painful honesty should elicit our deepest empathy. Right? But shame unchecked, shame that is fed and persists beyond those honest moments of vulnerability, is also incredibly pernicious. It's a dangerous and destructive emotion to leave unchecked in ourselves. It poisons. It's a poison that infects our essential self. A person driven by shame does not trust himself and therefore cannot trust others or be trusted. He does not respect himself and thus cannot take responsibility for his actions. The shame that drives him multiplies separation and destroys connections that could otherwise heal him. And that's the thing, is shame is not just an emotion. Shame is a cycle. And this is why Pride Month is so important, because pride is the opposite of shame, the opposite of destruction and distrust and recklessness. Pride is about creativity, love, accountability, and community. Pride supports queer folks in valuing and accepting who they are, their essential God-given selves. The celebrations of pride can overwhelm the otherwise loud and relentless voices of shame and give us some quiet space to reconsider the image of God upon which our self-respect depends. For me, this was a really long process. I can't really talk about it in the past tense either. It's ongoing because my evangelical upbringing was incredibly efficient and effective. I began life with an image of a God who was a disciplinarian and a judge. Period. Full stop. The image was formed for me by others through legalistic church teachings and the imposing presence, honestly, of my angry and hypercritical father who had made God in his own image as a hypercritical, judging God. And then, I don't think knew anything else to do but pass it down to me. Um, So when I was a sophomore in college and I fell in love for the first time, and it was with a woman, which was a total shock to me, and that significant facet of my essential self was revealed. I rejected it. My image of God predetermined that I would have to reject it in order to keep myself together. My image of God guaranteed that in that moment, something was going to go very, very wrong for me. And it did for a very long time. Based on the only worldview I had had access to, I knew for a certainty that God did not accept same sex love, and so neither could I. Even though actually, you know, I felt happier and freer and more seen and more valuable in the presence of my beloved than I ever had in church or at home or anywhere. But those moments were fleeting because there was this invasive image of a God who hated me. And so I rejected my sexuality and my feelings so that God would not punish me. But I also stopped going to church because it was entirely too scary to walk into the house of somebody who hated me. I was deeply afraid. I felt like, if you're a fan of early American literature, which no one is, I felt like a sinner in the hands of an angry God. You know? A sinner in the hands of an angry God who could strike me down at any time. I even stopped flying in planes because it felt to me like suspending myself 30,000 feet in the air would just be too tempting to God. It would make me even more vulnerable to God's wrath. And I know that makes no sense, but it's 100% a, a, a description of the real fear that I had. And I don't know how I survived those years. There were at least, let's say, 10 intense years where I was afraid all the time. I criticized myself mercilessly and constantly. I think that's probably why I pursued a PhD, because I was just punishing myself. When you're getting a PhD, no one like really says, hey, good job, you're great. It's like, it can always be better. And so I just was eating into that. And not only that, I was alienated from God and spiritual community, which I had known all my life. And I woke every morning feeling like I didn't have value. And I spent every minute of every day trying to recover from that feeling by achieving and justifying my existence. And I never felt safe. Fear became literally a part of my body. I had stored so much anxiety and repressed so much trauma that I developed panic disorder. And if you don't know what that is, it's not just anxiety. I would describe it as panic disorder it's not just fear, it's fear of fear. And my life became really exhausting. And I eventually realized that changing my image of God was for me like a life or death matter. Not meaning that I was suicidal, but meaning that the life that I was living, criticizing myself constantly and feeling unsafe, wasn't really life. It was more like a walking death. And it was at that point, I mean, not immediately, but shortly after this kind of realization that I was at a life or death moment, that I had a vision. I've had one vision in my life. I feel very weird talking to you all about this vision, but I think hopefully you trust. It was like, wasn't like an angel was sitting next to me in the car. Maybe it was, but I was driving Highway 395, a lot of desert and the Sierras in the distance. Was going towards Mammoth Lakes, and an image appeared in the sort of upper right-hand field of my vision. And there was a man, I excuse me, but everything for like the next 5 minutes is gonna be male pronouns and like the most conventional image of God ever, but bear with me. So, there's a man sitting on a park bench. He's in his 60s or 70s, and he's wearing a beige members only jacket. And so he's up here on the bench, he's sitting on the sort of left end of the park bench. And he's not facing me, right? He's not facing me, but he's turned enough so that I can see the side of his face. And also it occurs to me that he's positioned that way so that he's not facing me, but he can hear, he can sense if I approach. And it was a pose designed to, and it had the effect of being totally non-threatening. It was like a gentle invitation and a signal that he was aware of my presence for whenever I wanted to engage. Every detail of this communicated to me that, like, this was his spot. This was where he lived and stayed, right? That bench was his. That was his spot. And he had been on that bench a long time, waiting for me to come back. He'd been there all along, the whole time that I felt separated from God, all those years that I spent scared and running away. He'd been there all those years that I thought I was hated by him, in that spot with that same gentle, inviting, not overwhelming body language. And the vision was telling me, or what I felt was that there was a different story I could tell about my life. And there was a different story that I could tell about God. And that this vision was the beginning of that story from God's perspective, not mine. Because the sense was that I had gotten God very wrong. And when I say I'm simplifying. You all know it was the church and it was the family and it was the culture of evangelicalism. But in that moment, in that vision, it was just God and me. And it was very personal in that respect. And what I felt was that it was I who had walked away from God. And there wasn't shame in that, but that was very clear. God was on the bench. I couldn't see him because of all the bullshit from church, but I had walked away. And meanwhile, he had just waited and been kind of sad because he didn't want to be a part. This vulnerable God, and we do talk about the vulnerability of God at Central. This vulnerable God had been hurt by me. And I felt so sad because have you ever been in a situation where like your friend feels underestimated by you and they're hurt that you didn't like believe in them more? That was the feeling that I had. And I was so sad that I had neglected someone so vulnerable and precious. And I cried and then I sobbed and I'm still driving, 75 miles an hour. And, I just realized that wrapped up in the bullshit of the church and certain that I had very little worth because of that, I could not see that I was worth waiting for. And as a result, I had hurt someone who was utterly faithful to me, someone who had the exact gentleness and grace that I most needed. But I couldn't access it because I was in that shame cycle. And the evangelicalism of my birth had given me no out to that cycle at all. And so as the vision was still kind of hanging there, you know, by the way, I say vision, it was all in my mind. I've become aware recently. Do you know that some people can't see things in their mind? They can't imagine I thought everybody could, and I can, and that's kind of what it was, where you could see something in your mind. So as the vision was still sort of hanging there, I apologized aloud for not believing that he loved me, and then silently I asked if we could start anew, and there was no response. But I think that's because the question really was for my sake. The question was, "Julie, are you ready to start anew? Are you ready to commit to this vision of God rather than the image of a disciplinarian, judgmental God that you grew up with and that made you feel so horrible about yourself?" And so I committed to making this my vision of God, the gentle soul, loving and waiting on the bench. And I did that because I needed to live and I needed to finally and fully embrace the self that God had given me at birth. And it's still a process, but especially during Pride Month, it's it's a joyful process because I can feel pride more fully. I can embrace myself more fully knowing that, as it says in First John, God is love. Period. That's the first and most abundant and most essential thing about God, and every part of me, every part of us is held in that love. So, that's my talk for today, and, you know, we can talk about anything that inspires in you, and I wanted to maybe offer 3 questions for exploration. The first is, who made you feel like it was okay to just be who you are? Not to become something or someone acceptable, but that you were already acceptable. And the second question is, what is your image of God or source or higher power? And what do you see or feel in that presence? And then finally, I'm curious what we or the church more generally can do to help others feel pride instead of shame. How can we help others value and stay connected to their original self given to them at birth by God? Any comments? What do you think? I'm gonna stop the recording. Oh, it wasn't recording.
It's all right, I'm
I don't know
recording.
how that
It's all
happened.
good.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
It's an answer to the first question.
yeah.
Nothing's really fully formed in my brain, but I would say the people who made me feel okay, I feel like are all like, I don't know if they were even raised in any religious background, but like in college and then just living with a bunch of people throughout my 20s and like big house, lots of different relationships and just different ages, different walks of life. And seeing like they live such a genuine, righteous lifestyle and care deeply and love deeply and we're not judgmental, like made it really easy for me to be vulnerable about like my birth in evangelicalism and just, yeah, I think just seeing their love and genuine behavior to the world, to the other, and to like if they had a partner or just friends in the house, just seeing how they lived and loved was, I don't know, just opened my eyes to different ways of living and seeing God.
Yeah. No, I thank you for sharing that. It makes so much sense to me. I think that for me too, just it was people outside the church, people who actually didn't have a faith that they claimed, but were just living by, you know, kindness and compassion and like unconditional love. I my first encounters with that were people out outside the church. I have a mom who, like, every time she hears about some wonderful person in my life, she's like, "Are they a Christian?" And I love my mom. She's so sweet, but she, it's like, "No, mom, they're not." Oh. It really is like for people who stayed in the church and, like, never really questioned, there's this equation of, like, being a Christian means you're a good person. And I have found some of the best people outside of church, possibly because they don't have that shame and they don't raise their kids in that shame. So, thank you.
Was somebody else wanting to talk? I was just gonna mention that I was reflecting on that first question too. Who in my life made me initially comfortable with this person I was becoming? When I was thinking about it, it was really this this community and this church 15 years ago that, those who were here, like Bob and Max, and trying to think, some of you were here, maybe not 15 years ago, but 12 years ago. But we were on this journey together where we were discovering what it meant to be, sorry, got something in my throat, but we were discovering together what it meant to be post-evangelical and in deconstruction and destruction. But it was the community I had here that was so integral. And then it was authors and I don't want to say influencers because this was kind of like the influencer thing wasn't going on necessarily. This is back, more than a decade ago. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's like the old adage: when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When the individual is ready, the community appears. That you need, and that's kind of how it worked for me. I wish I could say it was my family that was there for me, to affirm who I was becoming and my humanity, my worth, my understanding of God as meaningful and true or whatever, but it wasn't. Just like it wasn't for you, and so for so many of you, it wasn't my blood relatives at all. It wasn't those who I was quote unquote closest to in that sense, which is kind of sad, but you make the family you need. You find the family you need along the way.
Yeah,
And that's beautiful too.
it is.
And profoundly meaningful. So it was this community, and it was the larger community of people who had come out of evangelicalism and religious trauma that made me feel like I'm okay and I belong. And it made me feel comfortable about being me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Sure, Maura. Yeah. This is this is for the podcast.
Okay. Maura with an M. Those are such great questions, and thank you for your story. I especially appreciated that contrasting of pride and shame.
Yeah.
That's a healthy self-pride.
Yeah.
Like believing in yourself.
Yeah.
And, I would say, all three questions are such great questions that really my brothers and I, we grew up Catholic, and we always say we grew up in a different Catholic church than a lot of Catholics because we had very progressive parents who didn't believe in a shaming, judgmental, punishing God, but really believed in a God of love. And, when Vatican II happened, my mom was like leading, the parade with singing the Beatles song, whatever, All You Need Is Love,
Yeah.
that was, my mom was doing like Pride Month way back before Pride Month was even a thing, probably. I remember going to meet my cousin Jimmy in Boston as a kid. And it was like, oh, he lives with they lived in an apartment, but it was like, this is the butler, like it was her cousin who was gay. But at that time in the 60s, she didn't know how to explain to me that and didn't feel a need to. But years later, when we talked, oh, yeah, that was the butler. He was his partner. And we laughed about it because she loved her cousin who was gay in the 60s and didn't, wasn't judging him but it was a weird world then, in that people were not out and it weren't accepted, and it wasn't something I guess she felt she could explain to a 5-year-old. But all that to say that growing up in a family where we believed in ourselves, I mean, not that there wasn't dysfunction. Years later, there was a lot of crazy shit happened.
Yeah.
But I remember a letter she wrote related to the crazy things that had gone on, kind of apologizing for it. And there was a line in it, and I found it after she died, saying that the best thing the only thing I want from you children is to be the best versions of yourselves you can be, and to love each other and love God.
Yeah.
And it's like emotional dysregulation, chaos, like, everybody drinking, smoking, we're all Irish. But there was this context of love. God is love. We love you. We believe in you. And we're all crazy and don't know how to really live that out.
Yeah.
So it's like, but that makes all the difference,
Yeah.
really. I feel like that thing and then in my spiritual journey, it just came back like born again. Oh, that's what they were talking about. Personal love of God. And it's like, you see the thread of pride. I see that, like just that, how it helped steady me through it all.
Yeah.
So it's a shout out to my crazy parents that did a lot of crazy things, but that value was super important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, probably all families are dysfunctional, so
Right.
might as well have the basis of that love instead of, discipline or punishment.
Yeah. It really makes all the difference. For me, when I've heard the stories of others, and yeah, I'm like, wow, to have a God who is punishing and angry and mean and hates you if you're not right, whatever that is, that's ugh, to have to live with that. No good. Yeah. Yeah. But thank you for your story and coming together in that. Yeah. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming.
I guess mine's less about my Christian identity, more of my religious spiritual identity. So I was raised Hindu, but I grew up with Christian influence. I went to a Catholic school my whole life. I studied at a biblical college. And my thing was growing up in Catholicism in a Catholic school as a Hindu. I had a lot of shame around my Hinduism because I would go to school and I would excel at Christian ethics, but I could never talk about being Hindu. I would be somewhat welcome to church, but they would tell me I could get a blessing or I could sit in the back row or I could take the day off, which I was like, I don't think I should have taken it as like, great, I get a day off, but I like gospel music. So I wanted to stay and listen. And so it was a constant thing of being like, is something wrong with me because I have multiple faiths? And I think coming to this church was the first time that I actually liked coming to church again. Because I think 10 years ago when I started dating Andrew, he brought me here and Aaron asked me like lots about Hinduism. And then you started having the world like religion series. And I talked about it to everybody back at home. was like, I went to a church and they're talking about Hinduism. Like, it's crazy. And they let me have the bread, which I've never, like, going to Catholic church, it was like, you can get the blessing. I can get like a little blessing on my head, but like never touch the crackers. So my mom used to pack me crackers in my lunch because she's like, you can eat it at lunch if you want. So eating the crackers here, I mean, they're not the best crackers, but I enjoy it. So it's
They're
gluten-free, welcome for all. But yeah, I think this church is the first time I was like, there's churches that are accepting of having multiple values and meanings and purposes, and it doesn't really matter the exact path. Because like I believe in Christianity. I'm here. I want to be part of it. But it's nice to be able to like say I also have Hindu beliefs.
Yeah.
This is the church that made the difference for me. So
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Well, we do have actually at least one announcement, which we didn't get to at the beginning. We have this week is Brew Church. Brew Church is a bit of a misnomer. It's not really church. It's more brew than church. It's we just get together and have fellowship with one another. Just like, we're meeting at a bar and chatting it up. Sometimes we play pool or darts or bowling. This week, it's Wednesday at 6:30, and we're going to be at the Blue Room in Burbank, which is a fantastic. If you were with us at the Colorado bar, it's a step up from the Colorado bar, but it still has a nice divey feel. If you come in from the back, you'll have to walk through some cigarette smoke, that kind of thing. So, but that's Wednesday at 6:30. Please join us if you would like. I think it coming up imminently. I mean, we'll have our dinner at the last Sunday of the month. We buy everybody dinner and location TBA.
Yeah, this month, all 3 of this month that we're meeting here who are trying to dealing with those kinds of issues.
Yeah. So I think that's it. Let's say our benediction. It's Bob. Okay. As we go from this place, we commit ourselves to the path of love, honesty, and humility. We dedicate ourselves as Christ did to the cause of justice and the courageous embrace of this life, this world, and each other. Amen. Thanks for coming.
Sure. Yeah. I used so Thanks for listening in on this week's edition of the Central Cast. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you join us next time. Bye-bye.